meetings, it is Rotary, and I would like to welcome everybody and thank all of the people that have decided to Zoom in to our meeting today. I've been saving that term for some time, and now I got a chance to use it. As we continue to utilize Zoom, we learn more and more. And one of the things before I get the meeting off to the start, I was attending a Zoom meeting this morning, and I was watching all of the participants, and somebody was smoking. And for the first time in probably 20 years, I wanted a cigarette. So I don't know what that says, but Zoom is doing strange things to us. Getting started, we're going to begin with a reflection by Father O, and then Ford Bennett is going to lead us in the pledge. So Father O, would you take the podium? Yuval, have you got a prayer in your back pocket?
No, I don't. I have many prayers, but not a specific one for our meeting. I'll prepare one for next week.
Well, how about you give us a few of your thoughts about this virus and our community?
Well, my thoughts are, and I had them from the beginning. I think that killing the whole economy for it was not justified. On Sunday morning, yesterday, CBS, they spoke about the polio of the 50s, and the amount of deaths there were unbelievable around the world, like millions of people. And they didn't kill the economy for it. Okay. So my thoughts are, let's get the economy back as soon as possible.
That sounds like a good prayer to me.
Yeah.
Ford Bennett, are you there? Is Ford here? Travis?
Ford should be unmuted.
I'm here, sir.
Okay, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Aye, sir. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ford. And if I don't say it enough, I hope that you know that all of your fellow Rotarians, thank you for your service to this country over the years. And I understand you've been promoted lately.
Yes, sir. Recently promoted to major, although I'm retired.
Is that a major in the Army or the Air Force?
Major of Marines.
We're proud of you. Thank you for leading us in the pledge.
Thank you all.
Yuval, thank you as well. I appreciate you, the fact that we stuck you with that so quickly. And we have, as normal, we have a new, we have a new sponsor for our meeting for the month. That's Hartman Bogan. And I appreciate Donna in arranging for that, and that's very generous of you. Thank you for sponsoring our meetings for the month of May. We're going to move through the meeting pretty quickly as normal, and we've changed it up a little bit because of Zoom. And having said that, I'm just going to turn it over very quickly to Bob Savage, who will introduce our speaker.
Pleased to introduce and have with us today Treasurer for the state of Ohio, Robert Sprague. Robert, in addition to being a sharp and good guy, is also a fellow Northwest Ohioan. Robert hails from Findlay, Ohio, and where he is a native, and served as city treasurer and auditor before moving up to to the state level. He graduated Findlay High School. He then went down and he must have studied pretty hard. He got himself into Duke University, where he was an engineering major. And I don't know what he thought of the basketball team, but he decided to further his education across town and joined the rival Tar Heels at the University of North Carolina. Then went on in career at the Ernst & Young and the State House of Ohio. But Robert has always been focused on financial issues. He's prides himself on stewardship, wise investment, and bold innovation, including programs like the Pay for Success program. And so I hear for an update, both on the state level and to talk about the economy as well, is our own Northwest Ohio's Robert Sprague. Robert, good to see you, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Bob. I really appreciate it. Tim, thanks so much for having me today. And I want to send a shout out to my friend, Bob Reichert, who really gave me this invitation, called me last week. I was thrilled to be able to do it. We live in a brave new world, but it's great to be joining you by Zoom from here in Findlay, Ohio. It's great to be up here in Northwest Ohio with my family and with all of you. I got to tell you, there's a couple things that I'm really looking forward to after the quarantine is lifted. One of them is having French onion soup at the Dorr Street Cafe. I can tell you without pause that that is seconded closely by having a couple of lamb chops at Beirut and a hot dog at Tony Paco's, hopefully with my kids. We have 5 children before the Mud Hens game. So looking forward to all those things that are a normal part of our lives in the summer up in Toledo. Hopefully they're going to be opening up. I want to begin by just saying that I appreciate Governor DeWine. He has been in a very difficult position as he wrestles with the coronavirus on the one hand and the economy on the other. I think he's been an incredibly strong, very thoughtful leader for our state at a very difficult time. And because of his early actions and his decision to kind of be 2 weeks ahead of things instead of 2 weeks behind, he really was able to flatten the curve for the state of Ohio. And now we're in a position to go back to work and do so thoughtfully without another outbreak. It's clearly a very delicate balance. But today, construction, distribution, and manufacturing offices have all opened up. So we're back on our way. And I know that he's also formed task force around some of our key industries, restaurants, barbershops, salons, and so on and so forth, as to try to get them open as well. So very excited about that. And I've been tremendously impressed by the patience, the resilience, and the perseverance of the people of the state of Ohio during this very, very difficult time. And it's great to see everybody working together. I personally have lived through a community disaster. You'll remember in 2007, Findlay had a 100-year flood, and many other communities were flooded as well in Northwest Ohio. Just some of my perspectives here on what we are facing as a state as we make our way through this disaster and into the year ahead. I think disasters typically have 3 phases. The first is the emergency phase. You've got the emergency response personnel, they're in charge and leading the charge. The emergency phase then transitions in kind of the rebuild as you're standing things back up. And then the final phase is the recovery as the economy begins to recover and your community begins to recover. So obviously during the emergency phase, the governor's in charge for the coronavirus, but I wanted to let you know about a couple things that the Treasury did behind the scenes. Our Ohio hospitals got into trouble with some of their short-term financing. By the way, I don't know if Steve Cavanaugh is a member of your Rotary, but Steve is, of course, the CFO for ProMedica up in Toledo, one of the finest finance professionals that I met around the state. Steve doesn't have a lot of short-term debt, but a lot of other hospitals did around the state. And their short-term, during the credit dislocation, their short-term borrowing costs went from about 1.3% all the way up to 8% in the matter of a week. And so we stepped in the Treasury with our balance sheet and dedicated up to $900 million for the repurchase of these variable rate demand obligations, so that as our hospitals were running toward the coronavirus, they didn't have to worry from behind about these increasing costs on their balance sheet. So we were able to save tens of millions of dollars for the hospital systems in the state of Ohio during the emergency portion, the very critical emergency portion of the coronavirus response. Then we're kind of moving now into the rebuild phase, is what I like to think of it. And I think as we stand up Ohio's economy, there's a couple things that we should think about. The first is we need to help our small businesses get back up and running again. This is critical. We tried to think about how in the treasurer's office we could help through some of the loan obligations for small businesses. And we found that the PPP loans through the SBA with the forgiveness piece was something that was really going to be unmatched. And so we tried to get the word out early on through our channels to communities around the state of Ohio about the PPP program. It's a very good program, very well constructed. And we've also said, look, we'd like to bring up to $1 billion of deposits back to the state of Ohio if we can, and invest those in Ohio institutions to make sure that that $1 billion of deposits is available for the rebuild of the economy of the state of Ohio. So we're still working on that, but that's some of our role during the rebuild. I think the other piece of rebuilding is taking a look at our public health system. We worked a lot on the public health system in the state of Ohio during the opiate epidemic. And as a part of that, I became very involved in trying to find new innovative ways to deal with the heroin addiction problem that we all faced in our communities. And what I became certain of was that no matter how many carriages you worked on, it was never necessarily going to turn into a car. And so we needed some new ideas, and we needed to involve the private sector with some of those new ideas. And so we created a brand new program called Results Ohio. The idea being that we would turn to private organizations that were more nimble and able to get things up and running faster. And then the state would only pay for new programs that actually produce results, why we call it Results Ohio. So innovative way to improve the private sector and have a great public-private partnership. And we hope that that sort of model can be used to take a new look at our public health system and help rebuild that at the same time to deal with the next coronavirus outbreak or the next opiate epidemic. In terms of then the long-term recovery for the state of Ohio, a couple things that I see and wanted to mention today. The first thing is obviously we need to balance Ohio's budget. We've got three different kind of pieces of revenue that we are dealing with as a result of the coronavirus. The first are some one-time hits of sales tax and income tax that we can use one-time money to help plug this year. The second are some delays in tax collections from April 15th to July 15th. Those are mostly cash movements. And then the third piece really is how we will deal with the reduction in the demand side and the future reduction in income and sales taxes. And for that, we want to make sure that we don't develop a structural deficit. And again, we don't want to ask Ohio's families and small businesses to bear any further cost to this epidemic. And so we're going to have to be innovative in the way that we look at our budget. In the treasurer's office, we are trying to lead by example and cutting our expenses and taking a hard look at our future budgets, already cutting our expenses by 20% in the treasurer's office. I think that local governments will also have the same issues that the state will in terms of balancing their budgets. And so in the treasurer's office, we are trying to look toward how we can help and support local governments. Two things that we already do that I think are very valuable, particularly at a time when the credit markets are dislocated, was we have the Ohio Market Access Program, where if you're a small government, you can use the full balance sheet of the state of Ohio will stand behind your construction note. The state of Ohio is be willing to rebuy that construction note in case you have trouble rolling it. The way that the debt market looks at that is the full faith and power of the Treasury is standing behind that note, and they give that local government the same credit rating that the state of Ohio gets. So at a time when credit spreads are increasing between high quality and low quality credit, that's value added to local governments, really helps reduce their cost. The other piece that we offer local governments is the STAR Ohio program. one of the highest rated local government investment pools in the nation. We currently have almost $13 billion in the pool, which we manage through the Treasurer's Office, again, getting great returns for the taxpayers of the state of Ohio and also those local governments, so they have more income. And then this afternoon, we're going to be getting on a Zoom conference call much like this. We want to talk and hear from local governments what we can do to help and how the state can help with their balance sheet and some of the future problems that they're going to face this fall and into next year. So those are some of the things that we're working on with regards to our budgets. And then finally, I think that we've got 4 different opportunities followed by some investment. And those 4 opportunities that we have as a state, I think that it's important. I was reading Urban Meyer, and he has this great equation that he shares with the football team that event plus response equals outcome. So, some event happens in the game. You have to determine what your response is going to be, and that determines the outcome of the game. And I think, we've been hit hard by the coronavirus, as many other states have, but the response that we formulate at this very critical time, in my opinion, will determine our state's future for the next 10 years. And so I think we want to be thoughtful. There's a couple of opportunities that I see. The first is reshoring of manufacturing from China as we reorganize our supply chains. I think that Ohio is perfectly positioned to receive some of this reshoring of manufacturing from China. The second piece is the auto manufacturing industry. Nobody in Northwest Ohio understands auto manufacturing more than Toledo and the surrounding communities. There'll be disruption in those supply chains, but wherever there's disruption, I think there'll also be opportunity. And so we have to be prepared to make investments to take advantage of those opportunities when they present themselves. Third piece I see as an opportunity really is the airline manufacturing. Down in Dayton and Southwest Ohio, we have an expertise in airplane manufacturing. 6 months from now, they may still struggle, but 6 years from now, they're going to want and need all those things that we produce in the state of Ohio, along with Wright-Patt Air Force Base. So I think we have a lot of opportunities there as we look at how we make investments in the state of Ohio. And the final piece is really this oil and natural gas in the Utica Shale on the eastern side of the state. As you've probably been reading, they're shutting in a lot of wells down in the Permian Basin. That ultimately is going to increase the price of natural gas, and we should be prepared to take advantage of that here in the state of Ohio. And then one last piece I see as an opportunity, probably across the board, is an infrastructure bill. I think we'll be receiving an infrastructure bill from the federal government here in short order. And we can build roads and bridges, electrical, water and sewer, 5G, extend our broadband networks. How we take advantage of this infrastructure investment are going to be the things that we will have strategically to be able to win in the next 10 years economically. So I think this is a real opportunity for our state. I know that there's a lot of short-term pain, but I think we also have to look to the future and say, what are we willing to do to win in the next 5 years, the next 10 years? What kind of investments do we have to make now in order to do that? And work towards solutions that bring us together instead of trying to blame each other for what's already happened. So we're in this together, and I think that we're going to be a state that's making investments when other states are making reactions. So again, thank you so much for having me today, and would love to answer any questions that you might have about the Treasury or our economy or the recovery.
Excellent. All right, we will open it up for questions to members of the club. If you've got a question, remember in the participants tab, you can click raise hand and we will call on you. I saw a couple of questions come in through the chat. When I get those, just a heads up, if you send those, I will attempt to send you a message to see if we can call on you to send that to you. So, and I'm getting critiques. I don't want to hear comments about the hair, folks. All right, it's quarantine, and I can't go to once we fully open up, I'll go get a haircut. Until then, let's go to Sharon Skilleter, who's got a question. All right, let me unmute. Past President Sharon, you're up.
Yes, thank you for being with us today. I had a question on the state of Ohio and the PPP plans. Many of us were lucky enough to get some PPP funds, but what happened in the state of Ohio is the governors shut the state down and we were unable to bring our people back to work. Now, one of the parameters is you have to use 75% for payroll for forgiveness, and the 8-week time period started from the point we got the loans. But we're just now, this next week, able to bring back manufacturing payroll. So is the governor going to address this with the feds for the members of the state of Ohio?
Thank you. It's a good question. I think that most of those rules are actually promulgated by Treasury, the United States Treasury, not the state of Ohio Treasury, but United States Treasury. I think it remains to be seen what kind of flexibility they will give. I think it would be a good idea if they did give flexibility, because ultimately the tremendous value of that program was not just the loan component, but I think there's plenty of liquidity in the market for people to be able to get loans, but it really is that forgiveness piece, and specifically what you mentioned for payroll. They're trying to obviously make sure that we don't have a huge dip in consumption. I think consumption is 68% of GDP in the United States. And so it would be smart if Treasury were to make some adjustments for that. I agree with you. They probably should have thought about that ahead, but they're designing this in real time. And I think you can understand where there were some challenges. And my hope would be that through our congressional delegation, we'd be able to talk to Treasury about that and get them to promulgate some adjustments and some new rules. I don't think Ohio is alone in this. There are many other states that kind of have similar problems. And there's many other business sectors. I mean, you think about, just the difference, if you will, for manufacturing that now is opening up and distribution to, a salon or a barbershop that's going to open up later. There has to be some sort of equity here. So my hope would be that we would be able to talk to Treasury about it. And I got to tell you, I think I've been pretty impressed with the U.S. Treasury. I think they've been fairly responsive. They've tried to make changes on the fly, and some of those changes have been very good. So let's hope that they understand that there's a lot of inequity in the way that the rules have been put into practice, not because they were designed that way, but just because of the way things have happened.
All right, next question coming from Sanford Lubin. Sanford, go ahead.
Yeah. First, thank you very much for taking your time and joining us today. Appreciate it very much. Can you share any insight or thoughts on possibilities of municipal bond defaults, or even worse, municipal bankruptcies in the state of Ohio? Any issues there that on the horizon that you see?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. I will tell you that Ohio's credit has always been very, very strong. That's both for the state and also for our municipalities. One of the reasons for the strength of Ohio's credit is that we have multiple tax sources. We obviously have income taxes, we have sales taxes, but we also have property taxes, which are very, very stable. I certainly could be wrong about this, but I think that Ohio's credit is going to be very good. I don't foresee any municipal or any other local government bankruptcies. We are very, very strong as a state. I can tell you that our state liquidity position is excellent. So if there's any credit rating agencies on the Zoom call this morning, I want you to know we're doing fine. We have plenty of liquidity. I think that to some extent, it's part of the future of those credit ratings is going to be dependent upon how quickly we can adjust our expenses to match our revenues, both at the state and the local governments. I think that further help from the federal government would be great, particularly in the form of infrastructure, as I've already said. And that would be a big help to our state and help offload some of the capital expenditures, particularly the cash capital expenditures that many of the local governments have in the upcoming months. The other thing I want to say, which is something that sets our state apart, is the tremendous strength of our pension funds and the fact that they are separate from the local governments and separate from the state government. I think that gives us that design has proven to be a strength for our state and something that not a lot of other states have. And they're getting into trouble with their pension funds, and we're not going to have the same problem. And I feel good about that.
How about municipal bond defaults? Do you see any defaults on the horizon?
I would just make sure that you only own Ohio Credit. I don't know about other municipal defaults. I do think that, you know, there are some municipalities where they have pension obligations, and they probably have now large deficits in terms of, you know, their asset base that, you know, could be running into problems. But I don't think that's the case here in the state of Ohio.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're gonna go to Dr. Claudine Whitfield, who has a question. I think we're having, I'm not sure if her video is working, but I'll throw it to her. Dr. Whitfield, you can go ahead with your question.
Oh, thank you. So first of all, I want to thank you for all that you've been doing. I mean, it's in this difficult time, especially for us in the medical field. So we really appreciate all the work you've been doing. One of the things you mentioned is that your funding with respect to heroin, which is, I mean, that's always been a very ongoing and deleterious effect to our society. But we have noticed with the COVID-19 that there is a very high percentage of African Americans who have died secondary to this pandemic, yet they make up less than 15% of the population. Is there any, in terms of the budget, to address this issue?
Yes, I think that I know that there is money that is appropriated outside of the normal budgetary constraints for the COVID-19 response. I'm not sure how much is devoted toward minority health outreach, but I do know that the director of minority health, who I've worked with extensively on premature birth weight and infant mortality, is doing a fantastic job and has helped lead the charge for this COVID-19 response. And I think we need, as a state, to put resources into minority communities to make sure that we help them during this very difficult time. And you're right, they've been disproportionately affected.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, John Wasserman is up next. John, go ahead. No. Hey, John, you got to unmute. I think you got to. There we go.
Okay. Thanks for your talk. Do you have any thoughts on the University of Toledo Hospital, medical hospital? I know they're looking at options and so on. I'm just wondering what your perspective or take or thoughts might be on that issue.
I'm sorry, I really don't. I'm not sure what the situation is up there, and I don't have enough knowledge about it to offer you a good opinion. So I'm gonna have to punt on that one. I'm sorry, John.
Okay, thanks.
And a reminder, folks, if you've got a question, you can type, you can chat into, you can raise your hand or type, you've got a question in the chat window. Murph, I noticed you raised your hand, physically raised your hand. Do you have a question?
Yes, yes. I'm unmuted. Okay. You mentioned, Robert, thank you for being with us, by the way. You mentioned the China question, and I didn't gather from your comments, were you suggesting that because Ohio manufacturing is strong, we should take over more of their, what they're giving to us, or were you suggesting we buy more from them?
Thank you. I need to redo the talking points in my talk, evidently, because my thought on that is that for a long time, we've restructured our supply chains. And quite frankly, this is something that I think has affected us more than just about anybody in the entire United States, particularly us here in Northwest Ohio, where we still know how to make things. We've sent a lot of that manufacturing overseas, and it's been a hard, long road for us. And you know, there's a lot of different reasons for that. A lot of it's our trade policy. A lot of it is the way that currency exchange is manipulated in the world. And I don't want to get into all that, but I think my point was that we should be able to take some of that reshoring, in other words, bringing manufacturing back from China to the state of Ohio. And, you know, when I think about that, I specifically think not just about, you know, car manufacturing, but I really am also thinking about things like the personal protective equipment, the medical device manufacturing, medicines themselves, reshoring medicines. I think of even chip production. I know in Findlay, we used to have a Harris RCA plant. We used to make televisions. We used to have a clean room where they made chips. All that's in Taiwan now. Bringing those pieces back, the very highly technical metal equipment manufacturing. I mean, we have some of the best research institutions in the world, Cleveland Clinic and OSU Hospital, MCO. I know that they've got research as well. Why can't we reshore a lot of that manufacturing here in Ohio? I think even the military parts, whether you're talking about the Lima tank plant or through the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, all those things need to come back to our country, in my opinion. And I think because we still know how to manufacture things here in Ohio, there's only a few states left that really know how to make quality technical items. And I think that we lead the nation in that. And I think that we should be able to take advantage of that opportunity and have a lot of that manufacturing come back to us and come back to us here in Northwest Ohio.
I was hopeful that that was what your thinking was, but I wasn't quite clear. So thank you very much. And I couldn't agree more. I'm scared to death of China taking over the United States.
All right, next question is to Kevin Dalton. Kevin, you can go ahead.
All right, thanks, Kevin, and thanks, Robert, for being on this morning. Appreciate the information. Question, you know, how do you see this impacting, or will this have an impact on the school districts in the state of Ohio? I know within the Toledo Public Schools, you know, we represent 29,000 students. And with all that's been going on with the pandemic, you know, we've been putting out additional dollars that we normally would not have. Do you foresee any budget shortfalls or deficits for the state's school districts?
Yeah, I think that I think it's going to be tough because obviously there's a lot of fixed costs there. The good thing about the way school districts are financed in the state of Ohio, for everybody else's benefit, is that it's property tax, which are largely stable. That being said, I think one of the problems is that you have probably a lot of immediate expenditures. And if we delay any other tax increases, you're going to have a cash crunch. And so one of the things, Kevin, that, and I appreciate your perspective on this, but we're going to talk with some of the school districts is if the treasurer's office can somehow work out a plan where we could advance cash in anticipation of future revenues that you might have as a school district to be able to help with those liquidity needs in the short term here. With regards to long-term budget issues, I think it'll depend largely on the decisions that the General Assembly makes. But I know everybody's going to be tightening their belt, I think.
So just a quick follow-up to that then. When you talk about, because I know the property tax and whatnot. So when we went through, you know, obviously a deficit or budget problem back in 2008 or so, what were the collections then for property taxes? And do you guys predict it'll be similar to then, what it was then? Because I believe our collections were way down back then. And I know that's a concern with been some of our district conversations.
I wish that I could tell you, Kevin, I don't know about the financing sources specifically. I'm a little bit surprised at that. So I'm thinking that maybe because the property taxes are fairly static, I'm thinking maybe there was an income tax or something else that was maybe an additional revenue source, but I don't want to give you bad information. I'd have to look into that. That being said, I think because of the opportunities ahead of us as a state, I really do believe that we should not have massive devaluations of property here. I think if we play our cards right, we could really come out ahead, as I've already talked about. So I think this is a different crisis than 2008. You know, 2008 was really a credit crisis. It was a financial crisis. This is different. It's a demand shock. And I think we have the chance to emerge from this faster and better than we did in 2008 if we're strategic, to go back to my earlier points, if we're strategic about how we invest our money and how we play our cards.
All right, we've got just a couple more minutes. Let's go to Tom Backoff. Tom, you can go ahead with your question.
Robert, thank you so much for being with us today. Can you tell us to what extent you and other statewide elected officials are involved with consulting with the governor and leading us through this pandemic and the COVID-19 crisis?
I can tell you that we are obviously, I've got a role to play as treasurer of state. You know, my role is to make sure that the state is able to pay its bills. And we're working on that. And whenever we have interactions with the governor, it's with our role to be able to make sure that we have liquidity to be able to pay bills, understand what they're looking at in terms of expenses and revenues. With regards, I think what your question is, you know, do you have influence with regards to opening businesses back up? Or, you know, are you talking with the governor about how to handle this emergency public health response? And the answer to that is that, you know, he's elected by the people to do that. That's his role, and I respect that. And he's making those decisions.
However, as a state, you as well are statewide elected, and I guess, is there a coordinated weekly meeting with you and others with the governor and his cabinet, or what is the leadership plan going forward?
Sure. We've been through, I think we've had a great interaction with the governor's office. There is not a weekly meeting. I'm not part of the governor's cabinet. I'm independently elected by the people of the state of Ohio. So I do not serve in his cabinet, but the communication has been great on the things that affect the treasurer's office. And on the other things, as I said before, during the emergency crisis, one of the things that was interesting in the flooding disaster that I learned was that during different phases of the response, in incident command, different people are in charge. And I think during the first phase of the response, it really is the governor and the public health officials. And I think as you see the economy reopening and you begin to talk about budgets and the balance sheet of the state, we'll be more and more involved.
Thank you.
All right, I think we got time for one more question. We're gonna go to Kurt Church. Kurt, you can go ahead with your question.
Thank you, Robert, for being here today. A quick question about property taxes, as you had mentioned earlier, as one of the revenue streams. Is the state looking at any sort of deferment or delay in individuals who have to pay property taxes based on the whole rent problem of people and the new movement about not paying rent or delayed mortgage payments? What's the state looking at as far as helping individuals in this situation?
Right. I don't know what all the General Assembly is going to look at, or the governor. I can tell you that we have the ability, liquidity-wise, to be able to tolerate different movements in terms of tax collections, which we're already having to do from the April 15th income tax date to July 15th. Just to give you an order of magnitude, that's probably over $1 billion of liquidity that we have to come up with in the Treasury, but we're fully capable of that. So we'll be in consultation with the governor's office and with the General Assembly as they look at these different options going forward. I don't know what will happen. I think though that it does need to be uniform throughout the state of Ohio, so that you don't have certain different counties doing different things, and probably some relief would be appreciated across the state.
Thank you. Remains to be seen, I guess.
I think so.
Right, President Tim, back to you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I appreciate it. Robert, I appreciate you being here. And because I'm the president and get to do cleanup on this presentation of yours, I get to ask a couple of questions that I've been watching the presentation and the questions take place. And one of the questions I have is we have identified, or has the government identified new definitions of essential workers and essential businesses that perhaps we hadn't before, so that we're ready to deal with this in the future? That's one of my questions.
So I think one of the questions that you're asking, Tim, is maybe even brings up a broader question about what should our country's response be? And what kind of a system should we have to respond to public health problems in the United States of America? And I think, as you look back over the last 6 weeks or 8 weeks here, unfortunately, because of the way the system is structured, our response to the epidemic had to be to shut down the entire trillion-dollar economy of the United States of America. And so I think that in the future, people are going to look to say, all right, how do we avoid this type of thing in the future? What do we need to do? What kind of public health system do we want? What are we willing to pay for? But then also, what are some innovative things that we can do in public health to make sure that we don't have the same kind of response again? So I think in terms of your question for essential and non-essential, I think that that's one of the questions that maybe falls under that broader category of what do we want our public health system to look like? What is going to be our future response to this? And how do we handle this in the future? And probably what kind of input do we get from the people of the state of Ohio as we define those things up front instead of having to do it in an emergency situation?
This has been an amazingly good presentation. I appreciate it. I especially appreciate that you're not all doom and gloom. You have talked about new business opportunities. You've talked about looking at some of our systems, whether they're business or tax or healthcare, and you've given us a recognition that we can do some things that may actually improve our economy when all this is over. So it's my take of this is that you're looking at it clear-eyed and at the same time looking at opportunities. Is that correct?
I think so. And it's difficult to do that. It's difficult when everybody else is down and everybody wants to react. It's difficult, I think, to keep your eyes on the prize and think out 2 or 3 years and try to make some strategic investments or strategic improvements, whatever you want to call them. But, as I tell my son who's in track, the difference between winners and losers is that winners do things that losers don't want to do. And that's mostly to get him to go out and run more. But I think that's also true of states. And we've got to make a decision of what kind of future we want for our kids. And I think I want my 5 children to be able to grow up and have a great heartland experience, just like I had when I was a kid here in Ohio. And I think there's a lot of opportunity ahead for our state if we're strategic and we're thoughtful and we're brave. We have the courage to make some of those investments.
I love what you're saying. I appreciate you being here. As we do with all of the speakers that we like, we are going to make in thanks for you being here, a contribution to our Polio Plus Fund, which is a signature project for Rotary. We have taken it down now that we're talking about pandemics. If we were having this conversation 40 years ago, I would tell you that today we had 1,000 new polio cases today, and that we should have every reason to expect about 350,000 victims of polio. As a result of what we've done and what now you have done, we have saved many lives, and I think the number is less than 100 in the entire world. We have every intention of getting rid of that disease. And because you were here today, you're part of that. You're saving some lives. And if we ever get access to our office again, we're going to get you a book about the history of Toledo. So thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Great presentation.
Thank you. I really enjoyed being with you today. Thank you very much.
You did a good job. Moving on, as we continue, just a few announcements for the club. And please, Robert, stay with us if you have the time. We have just a couple of announcements. Maria White is going to talk to us about Thursday social meetings. Maria, are you there?
Here, can you hear me, Tim?
I can. Boy, you look good today. That was a fun meeting on Thursday. I want that. You made my life better by going to that meeting. Tell me what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, we all, I think, had a wonderful time, and I wanted to report that we had 25 wonderful members on our first ever Zoom happy hour, where we called it Bright Spots of COVID-19 and Rotary Trivia. And in addition to doing that, we had a lot of fun, a lot of yelling, a lot of teasing, good-natured ribbing, and it was really, really fun for those of us that were there. We also had 2 guests that joined us, and at least one of them said that she was going to join us on our meeting today. So hopefully she was here with us, and we really enjoyed having her there. Our next Rotary Zoom happy hour is scheduled for Thursday, May the 14th. And we're asking for not only for all of you to join us, but also if you have any ideas for what our theme could be, we would love to have you give us ideas for that. We're also looking for suggestions on the time. Our last one was at 7 o'clock. p.m. and we're looking at possibly moving it up to maybe 4:30-ish, 5 o'clock. But we want to do it at a time that works for the most members. So if you would like feedback on when we have it, then please let us know. And both Scott and I are open to feedback.
Thank you very much, and thank you for what you're doing. I had a good time last week, and I fully intend to do it again next week. So
thanks, President Tim.
Next up, Mari Davis, are you out there somewhere?
I am. Hi.
What are you doing?
What am I doing? I'm in Grantland. It's a wonderful universe. Lots of deadlines, and but you know, I'm looking under all the spots to keep everybody afloat in the arts world. So,
are you still working?
Out of trouble.
Are you working every day?
Yes, sir.
That's good.
The whole symphony and ballet staff is working really hard. I don't know if you've seen the social media, Facebook, YouTube, etc. But we're doing so many concerts remotely, virtually, to bring music to our followers. So you know, we're kind of bringing the mountain to Muhammad, I guess.
You know, I know we're not here to talk about this, but just your point of view, are you finding that there are some advantages to doing Zoom meetings?
Nothing replaces in person. That's my feeling. But it certainly is better than nothing. And I like being able to see people, you know, one at a time. Because when you're in a room with 300 people, you don't necessarily get that interaction or recognition of, oh, that's so-and-so or that's so-and-so. So that's an advantage I see to Zoom. It's kind of, in some ways, it's more up close and personal, but you know, you can't beat the old-fashioned person to person. So
tell me what you're doing in terms of books.
Well, in the spirit of fellowship, I am a voracious reader. It is my therapy. Some people have an opioid addiction. I'm an addict. I'm a book addict. And if I don't have a book going, my stress level just goes through the roof. So I thought it would be kind of fun these days to offer an opportunity for everybody else to escape into the world of literature. So we're kind of looking at doing a Zoom book club for Rotary, whether it be members of Rotary, maybe you'd have a spouse who might be interested in it. I just thought it'd be kind of a nice way to get together, connect, get to know each other in a different context. And, you know, maybe once every 4 to 6 weeks, we do a Zoom book club meeting. I talked with Kathy, and I think the first step of this would be just to email me and say, I would love to be part of this. And then as we just, you know, as we figure out who's interested, then figure out what path it can take. Maybe we just, you know, pass the buck, and each week or each month or every 6 weeks, a different person picks a book, or we go by a different genre. it doesn't matter to me. I just think it would be really fun to connect and get to know one another through the world of books. And right now, you know, they're great escapes, great escapes. So I think, and it'll probably be in the spoke, if you want to email me at info2@toledorotary.org, Kathy can forward all those emails to me, and then we'll reach out and we'll get it going. I'm looking forward to it. I would love to get to know some of you through this vehicle.
Appreciate
So,
what you're doing,
let me
and
know.
I know I want to participate in that book club, and I'll look forward to seeing the information in the spoke.
Okay, cool.
I just got a message from Kevin, and he is saying that we can give a round of applause to Robert, our presenter today. But Kevin, would you explain to me how to do that?
I don't think I'm going to take credit for that message.
Okay.
But there is a reactions button on your screen in the bottom right that if you look down at the bottom of the menu, you'll see participants, chat, share screen, etc. And you can click the reaction and you can do your round of applause. I'm seeing them show up on the gallery. Let's jump to gallery view here. So we can all see the round of applause for our speaker.
Well, we will figure a way to do that. And of course, I'm very pleased that our speaker is here, and we'll figure out how to do a round of applause at some point. And of course, Robert Reichert for bringing him in to speak to us. I just have a couple more things before I close the meeting. We have two meetings today, one at 1 o'clock with International Services, and the second one is Vocational Services, which will be in a breakout room at 1:15. I'm hoping that past President Chuck Mann is there, and he's got a funny story.
Today, I brought a guest along to help me with the theoretical humor segment of the meeting. And, well, it didn't go like this in rehearsal, but here we go. We met several years ago, and she soon moved in with Barb and I to help with our daily chores and to help entertain the grandkids. Hardly a day goes by that we don't chat once or twice. She spends most of her time in the kitchen, where she stays very well connected. But today I've moved her to the den to be nearer with me. Fellow Rotarians, please help me welcome my special guest, Alexa. So, Alexa, is your refrigerator running?
Yes, I'd like your help to catch it.
Alexa, is 6 afraid of 7? Alexa, is 6 afraid of 7?
Because 7, 8, 9.
Alexa, how much do you weigh?
I am weightless, like a cloud. Wait a minute, clouds actually weigh a lot. So that's not quite right. Let's just say I'm more sass than mass.
Alexa, make me a sandwich.
Okay, you're a sandwich.
Alexa, who's on first? Alexa, who's on first?
That's what I keep telling you. Who's on first? What's on second?
Yeah, and President Tim.
I'm not quite sure how to help you with that.
Is there a Rotary meeting next? Alexa, is there a Rotary meeting next week? Alexa, is there a Rotary meeting next week?
This is what I found. Repeating event, Weekly Rotary Club of Toledo meeting on May 11th at 12 p.m.
President Tim, if this works, I'll be back next week. So let's give this a try. Alexa, Beam me up.
Okay, I'm getting.
Alexa, beam me up.
Okay, transporting in 3, 2, 1.
Thank you, past President Chuck Mann. I especially appreciate the announcement that we're having a meeting again next week. Same time, same place. We'll all Zoom in together. Speaker next week is Bob Baxter. He is the president of Northwest Ohio Mercy Hospitals. He'll give us an update about what's going on in the medical community, and I'm looking forward to seeing that. And I would like to thank everyone for being here. It's a pleasure to meet with you every week. So with that, the meeting is adjourned.